It appears the Schumer shutdown is kaput, and Keith Olbermanns is losing his mind. So that makes it a good day. It's the Newsbusters podcast. I'm Tim Graham, here today with managing editor Curtis Houck and senior research analyst Bill D'Agostino. Yep. Both of you have done recent studies or analyses of what's been happening with the shutdown, so it's a good time to talk shutdown. Bill, your study was all about how, which got a lot of circulation last week, 87% of all the shutdown coverage favored the Democrats.
Yep.
And what I liked about it best was the notion of conspicuously vague, where they would say, Congress has failed to pass a CR.
Yeah, I think that was the line that I saw quoted in the most pieces that cited it. But that is, I think, the best way I could come up with to describe it, because they were so disingenuous about what was going on. Like, this was because it is so blatantly Senate Democrats' fault that the government was shut down. If you know anything about government, that's not really like a debatable idea. It was by far the least information heavy cycle of a shutdown ever. Like, they provided practically no details about how this actually happened, because to do so would basically be to tacitly blame Senate Democrats. And so they were deliberately vague as much as they possibly could be.
You came in the middle to me and said, this isn't breaking down in the classic Republicans get the blame or the Democrats get the blame. It was like, let's kind of dance around where the blame lies to some degree.
Right. There was never any line anywhere about who had shut down the government. That was never said, as opposed to, say, in 2018, where it was, okay, Trump shut the government down.
But even today on National Public Radio, they bring on, this is what I don't like about so-called moderates, is they come on and say, stop being crybabies, just solve it, do your job. And it's like, the actual policy substance doesn't matter.
Well, that doesn't really go anywhere. And I mean, Bill, my key takeaway whenever I was asked about your study is the fact that less than 20% of all shutdown coverage in October mentioned in the evening newscast that Senate Democrats would refuse to vote for a clean continuing resolution, which is the entire ballgame in this scenario.
That's what the shutdown is.
What the shutdown was. And for less than 20%, only 12 segments on the shutdown to mention that fact, I feel like it's not just political bias, because a lot of what we do at Newsbusters, I try to frame as it's not just bias, it's bad journalism, because you're supposed to in journalism, you're supposed to include all salient facts about a particular story that you're doing. And I feel like in the hierarchy of facts about the government shutdown here, that would be something near the top you would want to make sure was included at some point. And the fact of the matter was that they couldn't do it. And so that's why I was so mad on Monday morning when they came out. Rachel Scott said Democrats, quote, backed away from what they were demanding as part of the shutdown. And Ryan Nobles pointed out that the healthcare subsidies and the refusals to vote for a CR was the reason Democrats had pushed for the shutdown in the first place. So they're coming out and they're conceding now, a la Joe Biden's cognitive decline, that like, oh, yes.
That's what this was about.
Oh, yes, that's what this was about, because we can now say, you know, now that the end is in sight, we can kind of say,
and now that all those elections are over.
And now that those pesky elections are over, perhaps that's most important to the Democrats here, that they ensured that this was an enormous waste of time and energy, was the Democrats felt like they needed to do this. And so now the discussion is how mad the liberal base is going to be with them. And
they're furious. And
did you see that Onion guy?
Oh, Ben Collins? Or?
No, the one who literally just goes by Onion Person. Actually, I don't think he might think he's I don't remember. I
don't tend to follow tweets.
I'm pretty sure he's
Onion Person.
Well, yeah, his name is Onion Person. But he tweeted last night, torture Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, okay.
Like these people are out of their minds. They are furious with the Senate Democrats.
Oh yeah, I mean Keith Olbermanns was giving these guys who voted for the end of the shutdown the GFY treatment, and he wants them all to resign. And it's like, yeah, well, Keith usually gets fired. He doesn't resign as a matter of principle. And I'm actually looking forward to Jimmy Kimmel tonight, because both of his Nevada
Nobody's
Democrats...
ever said that, by the way.
No, I'm looking forward to how Alex Christie will categorize it because both Democrats from Nevada voted to end the shutdown.
You mean the Jimmy Kimmel whose wife has bragged about how she's cut Republican family members out of her life because I just can't deal with these people anymore?
Oh yeah, maybe the Kimmel writing room will be a mess today.
Yeah, so the breakdown here of the 8 Senate Democrats here, most notably, you have a combination here of Fetterman, Angus King, and it was either Cortez Masto or Jackie Rosen, one of the Nevada Democrats. Those were the 3 that have consistently voted in the dozen-plus attempts to end the shutdown with clean CR votes that have voted with the Republicans. Rand Paul voting with the Democrats.
When is Cortez Masto vulnerable, by the way?
He must be up.
But most notably, the other ones here, so I said Angus King, John Fetterman, Shaheen, Cortez Masto, Dick Durbin, Jackie Rosen, Maggie Hassan, Tim Kaine. All of those Democrats are either A, not up in 2026.
Or they're not running.
Or they're not running at all.
Durbin's not running.
They're leaving the Senate, and one of the New Hampshire Democrats is leaving as well.
I think Shaheen's leaving.
Shaheen's leaving. So in that case, it's very clear. John Ossoff was a big vote. That should be a major talking point for Republicans. It's political malpractice if that doesn't come up in coverage of the Georgia Senate race because he voted no, and he was one of those people that I'm mad as hell about all this.
Yeah.
Now, Curtis, you had also done something about Capitol Hill reporters, people who are, I guess some of them are in charge of the Congressional Press Gallery, but all of their nasty tweets during the shutdown, that they were very critical of Speaker Johnson.
Right. By a 2.5 to 1 margin, I found that they were offering more tweets complaining about the House not being in session than they were talking about the effects of the government shutdown. And this was just on their X accounts. And so the cross-section that I picked was just kind of the deans of the Capitol Hill press corps. So we're talking about Jake Sherman, John Bresnan from Punchbowl News, Paul Kane from the Washington Post, Annie Carney from the New York Times, and
that other guy,
Jamie Dupree,
who was the worst.
Who used to be with Cox. But, and when he did talk about the actual effects of the shutdown, it was all about military pay and complaining that moving money around and soliciting a private donation to pay the military, all of those things were unconstitutional. So he was complaining that troops were still being paid during the shutdown.
He was complaining that the shutdown was being circumvented.
Yeah, that the shutdown was being circumvented.
How dare you?
The effects of the shutdown were being muted. And,
that's so bad.
For context, whenever there is a government shutdown, that is like the favorite game of anybody who claims to be a journalist is to find some random person anywhere and say, like, okay, this person's life has been ruined by this shutdown. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and now they have to move in with their uncle twice removed, and they're not going to be able to make it, and they have to take out a third mortgage on their house. And
this is one of the reasons I generally, as a media biased person, can't stand shutdowns. The Scattleberries can't afford a Christmas tree this year.
Look at the camera here. So if you've learned nothing else from the shutdown, gang, know going forward that whenever these kinds of things happen, these seemingly average Americans that the liberal media find, they're not really just random people that they just found out on the street.
Well,
no,
that's
very
true.
rarely is that the case.
That's true in a lot of these stories, but definitely when there's a spending cut victim or a shutdown victim, they will call around and this is one of those things you want to find out, like, well, this is a guy that actually lives down the street from me, people they actually know.
Right. Or often, depending on what the story is, it's like a Democrat activist or some community organizer.
Yes. Now, one of the more amusing shutdown pieces yesterday was Treasury Secretary Bessent was on with George Stephanopoulos. And, a lot of people will ask us, why are these Trump people going on the Sunday shows? They're giving them more
credibility
by appearing. And it's like, no. If you're doing it right, they're shattering their credibility. And, Bessent on with Stephanopoulos, he really knows how to troll the guy because he was like, I bought your book on Amazon, so one for you. And you called the Republicans terrorists back in the 90s. And he's like, this is a mischaracterization of history. And it's like, no. Here's you on PBS Frontline saying we basically called them terrorists.
Well, what I would like is for any Trump administration official who goes on, or any Republican period who goes on with George Stephanopoulos, to just clear the air, like start from the premise of, okay, so just to be clear, George, you are a Democrat operative.
Right.
That's why you have the current job that you have, is you were hired to be a Democrat operative in media, whereas your whole career before then was just a Democrat operative on the Hill, in the White House, whatever. But you are not a reporter. Like I wish that was just something that everybody would open with, and then, okay, now we can proceed with this interview.
Well, and two things here. Well, point one, shout out to my friend, the Factual Prep on X. She said, never mess with gay Republicans. They're always going to bring the receipts, and they're not going to let up. So, with Scott Bessent there. But the other
Is
one...
he gay?
Yeah, he's gay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did
the
not know.
highest-ranking gay person in American history. Gay person, because he's one of the top people
Well,
in
than
line
Pete
of
Buttigieg.
succession. Yeah, well, the Treasury Secretary is higher in
The
the
transportation secretary.
Right, but Pete Buttigieg was the highest rank.
At that point, but now Bessent is. But
I don't know how that's personally. I never know how sexual orientation is a qualification or a landmark.
It's grounds for secular sainthood, which is what Pete Buttigieg has achieved.
Normally, but Bessent, we don't really hear about that. And the other thing that I would say is with Stephanopoulos, he had it absolutely right. Stephanopoulos tried to move on with things, but Bessent kept pressing on it, and that's really where you got to do it. You can't just stop after the first time they try to interject and say, no, we're not going there. It has to be, it just has to come in waves when this happens to you. So he tried to start quoting him as well. And I think back to two examples. Number one, with the Comey indictment, he talked about American norms having been shattered because of the singular indictment. And yet here we are, the week of November 9th, the year of our Lord 2025, and we're still here. We're still going. America's not fallen apart. And then the other one is, even back in 2006, I remember our 2014 midterm study, how ABC basically had ignored the midterms leading up to Election Day. And one of the things that we had found an old quote of Stephanopoulos in 2006 was saying that anything President Bush and the administration says and does will be seen through the lens of failure.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, okay, this guy's supposed to be like an anchor, and he's openly espousing
Democrat talking points.
Talking
which,
points.
by the way, back to your study of what these idiots are saying on social media, that is a Democrat talking point. The Mike Johnson hasn't reopened the House. That is a Democrat talking point.
And
there is no reason for Mike Johnson to open the House
And they
if the
voted.
votes are not there on the Senate.
Well, they
right?
themselves said how to vote
Right.
before the shutdown.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that you're exactly right. Is that was always a lame point that didn't really make any sense.
It's a low info point that preys on low info voters, and the people making the point are either morons who are parroting it, and there are very few Don Lemons left at places like ABC. So it's mostly not people like that. It's mostly people like George Stephanopoulos who know that what they are saying is garbage. They know that what they're saying isn't actually a reasonable argument, but it's grist for their base, basically.
Now, some of us who've been around a long time, when they start talking about how George Stephanopoulos said that the Republicans were the terrorists, I go immediately to Bryant Gumbel in 95 when Newt Gingrich came in, and right away, before or just about the same time as they swore in the new speaker, Brian Gumbel has Dick Gephardt on, and he quotes him back to himself. He says, Gingrich and his ilk are trickle-down terrorists who base their agenda on division, exclusion, and fear. And then he just says, so are middle-class Americans in need of protection from this group? They not only repeat that the Republicans are terrorists, they basically then ask a softball question like, please tell us again how the Republicans are terrorists.
Right. They take an incredibly inflammatory quote from a Democrat, and they don't throw it in their face and say, do you really stand by that? They say, okay, so let's assume that's true. What should we do about it?
This is the same people now who are running around being extremely upset that anybody would characterize Antifa as terrorists.
Yeah.
But Republicans, that's fair.
You have no evidence for this. Oh, okay.
Did you guys see clips of Gutfeld this weekend from, he did a podcast with the New York Times.
I was totally unplugged.
Okay,
Yeah, the
so
New York Times guy, yeah.
here's the fun part.
bad.
Here's the fun part we should mention for a minute. And that is, he was basically making the point that once you say your opponents are Hitler, I can say you're a piece of poop. In the hierarchy of smears, I'm now allowed to call you anything because you suggested I'm a Nazi who wants to end democracy.
Right. And
Right.
I mean, to be clear, like, Hitler is beyond just what the Nazi regime did and what Hitler did, right? As far as the current political dogma. Hitler is basically secular Satan.
Yeah.
Right? Like it
That's
is
good, yeah.
it is he is the stand-in for you are the worst possible like living human that could exist.
Yeah, the left
Yeah,
uses
right.
the word fascist, and like some people may know what that means, but not, whereas Hitler, if you call somebody Hitler, that's a very like specific thing that literally everyone understands, that even if you were barely paying attention in like 8th grade social studies, what
Yeah,
we're talking about.
right.
I mean, I remember
I
was
saw
like,
the Hitler movies.
I was like 6 years old, and I asked my mom if who was like the bad guy of Earth,
Yeah.
because I was learning what countries were.
Yeah.
And she said, well, it used to be this guy named Hitler. And like that, I mean, that's just like how it's understood though, right?
Yeah.
It's like he is the bad guy.
And so describe that to them.
Right, you are the ultimate monster. And by the way, I mean, fascist, I would argue, basically just means enemy. That's essentially how it's used. Like if you look at the context in which it's used, they use that terminology for, I mean, like people like Onion Person do at least.
Yeah.
For Senate Democrats occasionally. Right? Like a fascist is basically anybody who is not 100% in lockstep with the progressive dogma, with the progressive party line. And so fascist basically just means it's okay to destroy you now, either physically or politically, because you are the enemy.
Now, Bill, if you missed the weekend, and I was out in the mountains this weekend, and in a cabin without TV. It was very weird for me. But I did catch Alex Christie noted Jonathan Capehart was on PBS, and he was saying there's a meanness and a cruelty here, basically that the Republicans are shutting things down. So that would have driven you a little nuts. But, Curtis, did you know who was on with Capehart? Did you see that? Your friend Matt Gorman.
Matt Gorman. My
How
buddy
did
Matt-
that happen?
I mean, Matt Gorman is one of those guys who's willing to go on all kinds of shows. He's gotten on Meet the Press a few times. He's done a really good job there. He's definitely not a Ramesh Panu.
Yeah, we've had rough times. Like, please represent the Republican point of view. Just a little.
The question is not like who's willing to go on these shows, though. It's like
who's allowed?
How did you get them to bring you on?
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Or, so like Matt Gorman or like Eliana Johnson is another one who actually, when she goes on that show, actually represents conservatives.
Yes.
Right.
I just have to add one thing about the shutdown coverage that I found particularly interesting. So Shaheen is leaving Congress, and so one of the House Democrats of the gerrymandered districts is moving up to try and run for the Senate, and there's a huge Republican primary on the other side. Guess who is running for the House seat being vacated by one of the people running for Senate? Shaheen's daughter, who has come out strongly against her own mother's deal.
Of course.
To do this, saying improving healthcare has been the cause of my life, so I cannot support this deal when Speaker Johnson refuses to allow a vote to send healthcare. Too many people will see healthcare costs that are already too high skyrocket. That means more people uninsured and all these other sorts of things. And so, you have one of those things where with the media coverage, Paul Gosar, that was always a huge thing. Paul Gosar's family hates this guy. He sucks.
Yeah.
And like CNN will bring that like his brother on or like one of his nieces or nephews and be like, yeah, this guy's a jerk, like both at the dinner table and in Congress.
Yeah.
Whereas-
I
So
thought
we'll
you were
see what
gonna, I
happens
thought
this
you were
time.
going to say it was Ken Burns, but
Well, Ken Burns, yes. We can also talk about Ken Burns as well. So
Well,
that's another thing.
I will just say as a contrast, I don't remember much coverage after Jeff Flake went turncoat and voted with Democrats during the Gorsuch confirmation. I don't remember any stories about his son going on Twitter and calling him a cuck.
ouch.
That kid was a nut.
Well, I brought up PBS for a second, but there's also the BBC. Big happenings this weekend.
Oh, yes.
The two top news executives resigned over, among other things, that they butchered Donald Trump's speech on January 6th.
They deliberately, deceptively edited it, and like in a very egregious
And
way.
once again,
Yes.
we have a meltdown on the left. How dare they attack a lot of the ways they feel about PBS and NPR? How dare they attack? Brian Stelter was saying they're trying to be nonpartisan. No, they're not objective. They're not even attempting it.
Well, there's a couple layers to this one, guys. Number one, the fact that this was in a documentary. This was not done in just a drive-by news segment. So therefore, because it was a documentary, you have to think that there were more than a few extra layers when putting together a documentary. This wasn't just a guy and a producer sitting there with Adobe or Sony Movie Studio throwing clips together.
Well, they were trying
like,
to suggest that, it was an outside contractor, like that excuse excuses it. If
Right,
it goes out on
exactly.
BBC, it's yours.
And like to deliberately do that, credit to
And what? Nobody caught it. Give me
yeah,
a break.
Maxwell Tawney at Semaphore, who usually is kind of a doormat for the liberal media.
Yes.
He actually came out and said, this is such an amateur move.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of thing that just should not be happening.
He's
these days.
He's criticizing them for being too heavy-handed.
Right.
Like, listen, the deception has to be a lot more subtle than this. BBC. Come on.
We're just cutting like whole phrases out. You can't do it quite that way. I mean, the funny part about
In England,
you
you
bring
can.
up Stelter. Yes, it's quite Stelter called it quite unusual that this happened, which
Yeah.
I thought was so funny, of course. And one of the two executives of who went down, the CEO, not the Director General, the very fancy title, the CEO.
Director General. I thought that was cute. That's a funny name for a news executive.
So they went down. But then the new CEO, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Deborah Turnus. Why do I mention that name, Tim? Because
She was an executive at NBC News.
oh no, so she's stunk it up on both sides of the pond.
I'm not saying that she was responsible for the Dateline truck explosions, but yes, it's embarrassing. And this is where, yes, a little applause to Max Tawney to just say this is bad journalism. But people seem to be upset because how dare they resign? They're actually acknowledging there's a problem. And of course,
Incredible.
even in Britain now, there's a controversy. The difference between the BBC and PBS is you have to pay a television tax, to fund the BBC. And so there's a whole attack about how the government funds the BBC. And of course, the left doesn't want to have that conversation over there, just like they didn't want to have it over here.
Yeah,
It's an
to
explicit
clarify,
line item.
in England, you have to actually have a television license. That is a thing you have to purchase.
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
They have the FCC, their version of the FCC is much more powerful over there.
What a surprise.
Yeah. And of course, it's a line item like in your taxes that you have to pay. That like you can go to the post office or you go to your accountant over there and physically pay it. And it's going up, obviously, by the way, for the next year. So
Yeah, and the BBC is not just the issue of the Trump documentary. I mean, we all know and have observed at Newsbusters that the BBC's coverage of Israel and Gaza is horrible. And in fact, BBC's Jeremy Bowen, when it was critiqued, he said, Hamas is a good source of information on Gaza casualty figures during a masterclass, and he also objected to the use of the word terrorist to describe Hamas. That's where the BBC lives.
Now, to clarify also, BBC is the regime media of a government that is currently arresting, what is it, like 1,000 people a month over social media posts?
right.
And almost all of these are complaints about terrorism that happens in their own country.
Yeah.
Right, because that's verboten. That's not acceptable. That's their civil rights issue over there. Is you're not allowed to get angry about importing like thousands of Muslims.
Ryan, I'm glad you brought that up because it's not just this kind of like general media bias that we see here in the United States. That we have plenty of free speech issues here in the United States, but comparatively over in the UK, it is so much worse. Jews wanted, I forget which town it was this past weekend, they wanted to have a physical event outside like their house of worship or whatever to kind of basically be like, we are not afraid. The police proceeded to, because they didn't do a permit or whatever other nonsense, they put them in a like caged pen off to the side of the streets.
Great optics.
Because right, I know. The reason
Why
I
don't
bring
you
that-
just put him in Auschwitz stripes?
because we can't guarantee your safety, which
You know
is
what they should have done is they should have given all of the Jews their special badges so that they could identify
by them.
make sure
Right.
they're safe.
But of course, the implication then is the fact that, we can't guarantee your safety, so this is how we keep you safe. Well, why can't you guarantee their safety? Oh, is it because there's like a group of men and like refugees that are just kind of running the streets right now?
So this is not a story that the media are doing in the United States. Now, we all remember that 60 Minutes did a story about how great the censorship was in Germany, but we haven't really seen this. Bill, isn't it frustrating to just think about how we would do in the country like that?
No, we wouldn't. Like, I wouldn't last a month over there. I would actually be in prison. And you can see videos of this happening on X in real, like constantly. The police showing up to your house to say like, oh, okay, we need to talk about some Facebook posts that you made. It's like it's laughable. It's hard not to laugh at it because it's so stupid. But like then these people actually go to prison and it's like, okay, maybe not so funny anymore.
Well, and so you were talking about how you wouldn't last this long too, but and I think it also requires some perspective of two things. Number one, we have plenty of free speech issues again here in the United States, but they pale nothing in comparison to what we actually see in other countries. And the other thing is this kind of dangerous thing, especially in the UK. Maybe you can make the case other parts of Europe and the EU, all that kind of nonsense, but specifically the UK, especially since they're out of the EU and they're considered our closest ally, and they are what you would normally consider the like beacon or at least the origins of Western civilization.
Yeah, no longer beacon of democracy.
Yeah, no longer beacon of democracy, no longer, the core of Western civilization, but we nonetheless need them if we are to win this fight against, I guess maybe the Chinese way of life.
Well, but I think this is the whole problem, and that is all the people who are the most fervently worrying about the end of democracy are the ones that are going to say, I'm sorry, you misgendered someone, you go to prison.
And the ones who are applauding with totalitarian fervor at the idea of turning England into a caliphate.
Yeah, every time that they use the phrase authoritarian playbook, we'll show pictures of the people in jail for their tweets.
Right.
There's actual Islamists that are local officials in England who are running for elected office in their original countries. There's town officials, I believe, in a town in England that are running in Bangladesh's election.
Right. No, and they're telling you
holding.
They're telling you what they want to do. Right, like they're saying, okay, Islam will take over England, and if you make a Facebook post about it, you're like, I don't think that's a good idea. Then the police show up and arrest you.
Well, and their argument,
it's incredible.
And and if you really press them, their argument, well, we're here because we're afraid that someone may shank you, and you're like, well, maybe you should do something about the people that you're fearful will shank us in public.
Right? Why don't you arrest the shankers?
But, and the press don't want to go there with this. The BBC would rather tiptoe.
I'm just going to leave that right there. But yeah, no.
Someone's doing the shanking.
Yes, but this does happen to some degree in the United States, where they would say, I'm sorry, we can't allow this conservative or libertarian professor to speak on campus, like at NYU recently, where it was like, we can't guarantee your safety.
Well,
Heckler's
veto. But I believe the Supreme Court actually ruled that that's not an acceptable reason to curtail somebody's speech. The heckler's veto is not protected. So that's technically an infringement of somebody's First Amendment rights. But again, this gets now into the question of, well, what really is legal? What really is constitutional? When you have a bunch of liberal judges that aren't going to enforce anything as it's written, then the question of what's legal or what's constitutional becomes very fluid.
Well, this goes to tie it both to our first discussion about the shutdown and this one as well. The great Farad Mahed on Twitter always points out that this is a larger discussion about Article 3. About the power of the judiciary.
Yes.
Are you just going to offer monologues like you're an MSNBC teleprompter, or are you actually going to enforce the law?
Well, are you going to cite Hamilton the play?
Did you had that on Friday that some judge on the shutdown, just to bring it back around to the shutdown at the end here, was basically like, this is going on too long. Like, who made you
Americans
a CNN
are
person?
going hungry right now, and the administration needs to do something, was what this judge said. And of course, gang, party ID, bias by omission. They did not point out this was a judge appointed by Barack Obama. This was an Obama
and
judge.
It's always,
of course it was.
It's always the case when they're saying judges are trying to restrain Trump. What kind of judges? Who appointed those
and there's
judges?
No laws
judges
being
who
cited.
share your exact political ideology and who got into the profession of being a judge or of being a lawyer, activist lawyer, for the same reason that you got into journalism, which is to affect political outcomes. So not because of any love of journalism or love of the law or love of the Constitution. Correct. It's to help your team win. These people see themselves as participants in the political discourse. They don't see themselves as arbiters.
Basically, it's the ABC, it's the judiciary version of objective ABC anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Exactly.
Oh, Stephanopoulos in a robe.
And so can I just say about this BBC thing, the fact that there are any American journalists flipping out that people were fired over deliberately, deceptively doctoring a clip of a world leader speaking. The fact that there are people upset that somebody's losing their job over that. There are journalists upset about that?
It's just, look, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, it's not about journalism. It's about team.
It's not about journalism. It has never been about journalism. And the fact that they still claim that hat is disgusting.
Power.
And that's why we need to keep our foot on the gas constantly, right? I mean, whenever people ask me, is there going to be reform at these networks? It's like, is the Democrat press office going to stop being pro-Democrat after they lose an election? Like, no. Why would they do that? No, they're just going to keep trying.
And this is the perfect setup. It's why you come to Newsbusters, to get all the detail once, twice, 24 times a day. Thanks for listening and watching.